All right, let's dive into something pretty wild today. We're talking about a seriously complex AI system with a name that sounds like it belongs in a science lab that says it can predict the Africa Cup of Nations. The big question is, can it actually work? Let's find out.
I mean, that's really the ultimate question here, isn't it? Can cold, hard numbers and algorithms truly predict the passion, the chaos, and the sheer drama of a major football tournament? Well, this system thinks it can, and we're going to dig into exactly how it tries to do it.
So get ready for this name. It's called the KEI-ATPase 3.0 system. Yeah, I know. It sounds like it should be analyzing cellular energy, not a last-minute winner. But that's kind of the whole point. It views the game less like a sport and more like a complex biological system.
Okay, so before we can get to the good stuff, the predictions, we've got to learn to speak its language. The system uses its own unique vocabulary to describe what's happening on the pitch. So let's decode some of these key terms.
First up is a term called structural integrity. This is really just the system's fancy way of asking, how solid is this team, How organized are they? How disciplined is their defense? A team with high structural integrity is like a fortress. It's just really, really hard to break down.
Next, we have friction total. I love this one. It's all about quantifying the chaos in the middle of the park. If a game has a high friction total, think of it like a massive traffic jam in the midfield. Lots of tackles, lots of interceptions, nobody can get any rhythm. It's a measure of pure disruption.
Then there's the defensive decay rate, or DDR for short. This one's brilliant, actually. It's like your phone battery. When you run a bunch of heavy apps, the battery drains way faster, right? Well, DDR is the same concept for a defense. It measures how quickly a team's shape just falls apart when it's under constant, heavy pressure.
And the last key term for us is metabolic equilibrium. This is what the system calls a deadlock. It's what happens when you get two really physical, really cautious teams that just completely cancel each other out. It's a predicted stalemate.
All right, so now we've got the lingo down. We know what these weird terms mean, so let's put it all into practice and see how the system applies this language to actual AFCON qualifiers. First up, we've got a classic David versus Goliath matchup, at least on paper. It's the powerhouse Senegal taking on the underdog Botswana. And yeah, for the AI, this one is about as straightforward as it gets.
And here you can see the actual numbers. This comes from something called the sanitized output matrix. But just look at that confidence score. 0.89. That is incredibly high. The system is basically screaming that Senegal will win. But, and this is the interesting part, it's also predicting a controlled win, under 3.5 goals. So why is it so confident? Well, it all comes back to those terms we just learned. First, there's a huge elite structural disparity. It's a massive gap in organization. And second, it thinks Botswana's defensive decay rate is going to be through the roof. Put them under pressure, and they'll likely crumble. The only risk it sees? Senegal just kind of takes its foot off the gas and settles for a comfortable 2-0.
Okay, so that was the easy one. Now let's look at something way, way trickier. We've got DR Congo versus Benin. And here, the system doesn't see a clear favorite at all. Instead, it's flagging this as a gritty physical slog.
And check this out, it's the perfect example of that term we talked about. The prediction is a draw and under 2.5 goals with a pretty solid confidence of 0.72. This is a textbook case of metabolic equilibrium in action.
So the thinking goes like this. Both of these teams are tough, they're cautious. The system expects a high mutual friction total, meaning that midfield is just going to be an absolute battleground. Neither team is going to find a rhythm. It's a stalemate waiting to happen, where one tiny mistake, a silly foul in the box, could decide the entire thing.
But here's what's really, really cool. The system doesn't just spit out a list of individual predictions and call it a day. No, it takes it a step further. It ranks everything by how confident it is and then builds an entire strategy from that.
And you can see that pecking order right here. Senegal is way up at the top with that massive 0.89 score. Right behind it, Nigeria gets a win, then Tunisia. There is absolutely no question which outcomes the system likes the most.
And then it gets even more interesting. There's a part of the system called the ligase engine, another great name. And its job is to perform a strategic allocation. That's a fancy way of saying it decides where to focus its attention.
This chart visualizes it perfectly. Look at that. The biggest chunks of the pie go to the most confident picks. 30% for Senegal, 25% for Nigeria. And that DR Congo draw we talked about, the risky one, it gets a tiny, tiny 5% sliver. It's basically creating a portfolio of predictions weighted by certainty. So here it is, all laid out. the final strategy. And you have to love the terminology. The top 2 picks, Senegal and Nigeria, are designated as ultra banker. How great is that? Tunisia's win is a strong value, and the DR Congo draw, high volatility. It boils all that complex data down into a super clear, actionable game plan.
So let's just take a step back for a second. What does all of this actually mean for the game itself? Where is all of this analysis heading?
You know, when you boil it all down, it all comes back to a single number, 0.89. After all that complex analysis of friction and decay rates, the whole machine spits out this one, simple, powerful number. That's its anchor. That's its ultra banker.
And this quote from the analysis really gets to the heart of how this system thinks. It prioritizes structural dominance. In other words, it trusts quality. It trusts organization. It's betting that more often than not, a well-built team with a solid plan will beat chaos and luck.
Which leaves us with this one huge question, doesn't it? In a sport that we all love for its human emotion, for those moments of genius you just can't predict, is data like this becoming the new star player? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for digging into this with me.